Good day to you. This is Anagalactic. We are completing a two-part series on time, where in this episode we give you the solution to the quantum paradox. So let's state that exactly what we're going to solve. The quantum paradox is the discrepancy between continuity and impenetrability. The clock is a circle. So why do we think of the sphere as being different from the circle? If you know the answer, post it in the comment right now, because the Earth is a ball. But if you took out the inside of the Earth and just left the gravitational surface of the protonic integral, that's the exact nature of gravity. I just stated it physically. So the gravitational surface of the protonic integral is a geometric. Okay, that's a geometric sphere. Now, how do you know that that's a sphere? It's because it has a center. Now, what about a circle? Well, you can see that the relationship is geometrically stated, it's the linearization of the sphere. That makes a disk. The solar system is a disk for that reason. So Hubble's tuning fork might just as well say spheres and circles. What we're going to get two things today, and at the very end we're going to have a new definition of God. The new scientific definition of God. It comes about from knowing spherical geometry. It really is. It's just that simple. It's how you come to know God better. This could be talked about for centuries. I have no idea what I'm saying, but people will be watching this going, oh, this is where it began right here. So we will have a new definition of God, yes, one that all scientists will be able to accept. Richard Dawkins will just take his hat off to me, just bow, just probably cry, just break down, just in tears, trying to grab my ankles, just sobbing into my shoes. So fantasy hour now being ended. Let's return to our main program, shall we? So, just to get right ready to take that last jump and solve the quantum paradox once and for all, wouldn't it be nice if you had spherical mathematics? Well, lo and behold, that's what this is. Those two numbers have physical meaning. We just switched from grid to spheric, and we did so by switching number systems. We will now explore further, and in my presentations to come through the summer solstice, we will be tackling every single aspect of the quantum paradox, so you'll be able to visualize everything I say. But there are no lines anywhere. Instead, there are two new lines. And one of those two new lines is a sphere. What we covered yesterday was the answer to the paradox then of if your sphere is the center of the universe, then what would you say about the center of that sphere? Is that not a reduplication of the infinite recursion of Zeno? Because you can't get the smallest sphere that way. It goes on infinitesimally according to Zeno. That has never been disproved, and that's a genuine paradox. You are looking at the solution to that. The center of numbers has a finite boundary. It is 1. There is no number less than 1 in spherical geometry. Now, we've already covered the fact that the entire linear algebra system is embedded in this system, so nothing is lost. Everything translates. So we're comfortable with that, I hope. Otherwise, listen to the last two presentations. But if we're ready to go now, we are now looking at a sphere, not a grid. If you were doing what we're doing with 4D EFE space, you would see a light cone. What do you see instead? You see a sphere. Do you know what the light cone is? It's light speed. That's what the cone represents in a 4D space-time diagram. Okay? And so it's a cone. It's actually a double cone, right? Because it has a vertex, and the cone opening down is time past, and the cone opening up is time future. So generally we project up, but it has the reflection back. That's a space-time diagram. There's a constant in the diagram. It's very important that you see the constant, and it's a mind bender what it is. First of all, you're looking at 4D space that's projected down to 3D, so you're going to have to figure out where the fourth dimension went. But without getting into that much intricacy, which I've given the full explanation of that light cone in prior presentations, but that constant is the light cone itself. Light speed in the diagram is the double cone. That's a very peculiar form of a conic. The fact that it's a cone identifies it as a conic, but it's a very specific one of the conics, and it's unique because it has a vertex. Conics are slices of the cone, but the light cone is not a slice of the cone. It's the cone. Now, that's in 4D space, projected to 3D. So there's our 3D overlay of the universe. It's the light cone as the constant of the diagram, which is space-time. Now, look at 2P. That was 3D. Now we look at 2P, and instead of the light cone, what do you see? A sphere. That's correct. What we're going to do now is identify all four dimensions of Einsteinian space where they exist in spherical space. And that will enormously simplify the diagram and show a direct relationship between a space number and a time number, but you'll be able to see the time number. And if it doesn't rip your mind into hyperbolic deformation at risk of your very sanity, then you're not seeing it as accurately as you might. So be forewarned. You might experience vertigo, and you may need a straitjacket if you're not careful because of the clarity snap. You will suddenly be able to see in a new way. That's, I would say, a corollary to the proof. Maybe a footnote. It's another footnote. Let's not go on that vein. So the light cone in Einsteinian 4D is equivalent to the sphere in two proportion space. Those are the two fractions. So there are two fractions that define that sphere, which is light speed. And by the way, we proved that in the past two presentations, that sphere is not only the light cone, but the light cone is light speed. So is the sphere. That's light speed. That's the geometric representation of light speed. It's a constant number. we can use a special mathematical trick which is used at the highest level called unitization, also called normalization. You normalize to a unit, which you can look up in the SI structure. What are your choices for unit? One of them is light speed. So you can unitize light speed. It is in fact done regularly in ultraphysics mathematics. They unitize light speed to 1 in order to study quantum phenomena. It's very helpful to think of light speed as 1. What's even more helpful is to know that 1 is the number representing a sphere. And therefore you can switch to spherical numbers and know full well, according to my proofs executed in 2022, that proves everything we're going to do right now to be perfectly accurate. We're going to assume now that the two fractions that represent that sphere and the entire universe of spherical numbers, which goes all the way to infinity and stops at infinity and is fully consistent, closed, and coherent, and superior to the linear number system and much more accurate since it incorporates the calculus. All calculus equations are solved in this space. They're the solutions to all calculus equations are bound in spherical space. That's where the solution set exists for all the solutions for parametric curvature. So this goes well beyond relativity. And we're going to see how this improves the concept of relativity, because it's going to be absolute relativity. Einstein's relativity is relativistic relativity. This is direct perception relativity, which means your mind will split, and then it will resynthesize in a new way. So you may experience something like the end of 2001. So be prepared for your first direct confrontation with the nature of time and space and space-time, and in the next presentation, time-space, and in the presentation after that, hyperspace. And that's the 4D solution for invisible space. And we do live in two parallel universes, but as you will come to see directly, that's an illusion of parallelity. It's actually perpendicularity in spherical space. And the space exactly that we cannot see, that is the parallel universe, is the universe of time. But as you will also come to see, time is a derivative of the circle, because the circle is parameterized onto fractions also, just as is the sphere. But the circle is centrifugal force, which is a unit of measure. It's one of the two directions in spherical space as manifested by centrifugal force. That is called light. The centripetal force that completes the Noether balance to totally unitize space on a two-component number is centrifugal force. That is gravity. So this is the direct relationship between gravity and light. Gravity is chiral in, light is chiral out in spheric space. Those are the two directions on the radial line, which is one of the two lines. The other line is perpendicular to the radial line. That's the spheric surface as it expands. So now the universe is expanding from an exploding one by a centrifugal force. The centrifugal force is manifest on the spheric surface, which is one of the two lines. But you could also think of it as the radial line pressure. That's centrifugal force. Centripetal force is when the line is reversed and the sphere contracts to the center. That's gravity. That's the direction of gravity. The direction of light is the opposite direction. It's the opposite direction in space-time. Space-time is the sphere. Space-time is light speed. So all of these are to say the same thing, but there's a skew. And the reason that doesn't make sense to you is because I didn't state it as accurately as I could have. And now we transfer our attention from the sphere to the circle, which manifests motion. Click, click, click. This is event space, and we measure it on this click. Click, click. What's the interim? The click is the click, but what's in between clicks? The circle is. So this is unit time. Click, click, 1, 1, 1. That's why the circle manifests 1 in 2 different dimensions. It manifests 1 in the time dimension on a repetition. Click, click. That is perpendicular to space. Click. This is motion. So motion is perpendicular to space. It goes deeper. This is the only motion in the universe. Click, click. That is motion. Is that time? Click, click. What part of that is time? This is motion. Click, click, click. What are you measuring? You're measuring 2 things at once, aren't you? You're measuring the circle at all times. But how are you measuring the circle? You're measuring it on clicks. This is done in river navigation also. A certain number of clicks upstream, for instance. It's meant to be a distance, but these clicks are not distance. Are they? Are they or aren't they? This is called superposition. Because you can see that it is and it isn't, or it's both, or it's one or the other. That's called quantum gate logic. You're seeing the relationship between the click and the duration between clicks. There's a number of clicks. So far we've only said 1, but listen. Click, click, click. That's 3 clicks. You just measured time in clicks. But you also measured something else exactly proportionally to the number of clicks. It's the distance around the circle, isn't it? So that distance is absolutely critical to know. Well, it's 1. So this is where our concept of 1 splits. And there's a footnote that's explanatory of that, and I've given presentations on that, but it was about a year ago, on Conway's number generator tree, the surreal number tree, binary tree of the linear numbers. Has direct insight into this constructor, has direct effect on our perception of the numbers we get back from quantum mechanical experimentation. The numbers don't seem to be right because of Bell's inequality. And Einstein has been screaming even from his grave to someone figure that out. Well, you'll be able to do so, but only when you're able to see through walls. It's really simpler than that. I'm exaggerating. You're going to be able to see ghosts. What I'm trying to tell you is you're actually looking at the perpendicularity that is invisible to humans, but is actually real. it's invisible reality. It's perpendicular to spatial reality, which is all we see. We don't see time because time is not a seeable thing. But is energy a seeable thing? Yes, it is, but how is energy seeable? Not in space, although it occurs in space. But energy is only measured in motion. And we just showed that motion is the manifestor of the time component. But motion occurs in space as well as time. That's the circle. It's manifesting both space and time at the same time on the click. And the motion is what's causing the click. So the frequency is the fractional measure of the circle. The beginning at 2, click, click, that's 1 second. Or click, that's 1 second. Or click, 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 that's 1 second. Or click, 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 that's 1 second. You're dividing 1 into unit fractions. Unit fractions, because you can only put a whole number of points onto the circle. You can't put fractional points. The points themselves are fractionalizing unity to generate the unit fractions. Beginning at 1/2, that's the wavelength. What's the frequency of wavelength 1/2? It's 2/1. The number of points on the circle is the wavelength frequency relationship. F times nu equals c. So we've unitized light speed and we've proved that it's on the circle and that it is the energy component, and it's also centrifugal force, and it's measured in angular momentum as a 2-component spherical number. One of which is time, the other is the space component on the circle, which is 1. So time is the only thing being affected. The space component of the wavelength is an illusion. There's no change in space at all. It's a change in time. Time is being divided from unity. So it's a fraction of light speed, isn't it? That's time. Time is the fraction in light speed. So if the number system of the universe were finite, we could find the unit for time directly from light speed. Currently, we have it set as 1, but all you have to do is find the reciprocal of light speed, and you've found speed light, I suppose you'd have to call it. What would that be? These are related. We're not just measuring one thing. Light speed is just one of 2 things. Light speed is the amount of distance covered in unit of time. The reciprocal is the unit of time covered in a distance. Right? So if you unitize the distance to 1, then the fractional component on the surface of the circle is 300 million. Correct? Now let's solve the quantum paradox. The best way to approach the quantum paradox is with the maximally confusing form of the paradox called entanglement. This is the one that Einstein selected, so we're on firm ground. In selecting the manifestation of the quantum paradox, which comes in many forms, and we'll cover them all. We will cover every single one of them and get the solution for every single one. But they will all follow the same pattern, which we set now by solving the entanglement problem. The first thing to realize, and I'm just going to state this because I covered it in a prior presentation, the correct term for entanglement, which is a term from logic, is coordination, which is a term from geometry. So the 2 particles are coordinated and then separated, correct? So the miracle that seems to defy special relativity is those two things do not know that they're separated, correct? So how do you explain that? How is it that those two particles do not realize that they're separated? That it's been proved that that's the case. So then when you go to measure one of them, the other one changes faster than light speed would allow, because it changes at the speed of light. In other words, it's instantaneous change over space. How is that possible? It's because you perpendicularized the particles. And that's the answer. You perpendicularized them. By separating them in space, you did not separate them in event. And you just fail to see that because you don't know the right geometry of what you're doing. They're still connected. You just can't see it. And so you just discovered the supernatural realm. And it is supernatural by the specific meaning of supernatural, which has nothing to do with ghosts. It has to do with reality, the ultimate ghost. The part we can't see is the part you just saw. The separation is illusory and is fully explained on natural geometry. And that is the solution. You've separated them linearly, and therefore you did nothing. You separated them linearly, perpendicular to their actual separation. And so you don't see any change. Because there was none. You just, well, actually you see the change. You think you did something. But if you saw it in spherical space, all you do is rotate it 90 degrees, and you'll see that you didn't do anything to those two particles. You thought that you separated them, but you didn't. So you failed. And that's the solution to the quantum paradox. Your experiments are failing. And I hope that helps. And now for the definition of God.
For the first time, science has never made an announcement about God in its whole history. Well, I'm going to try to start something. Considering that this is blueprinted to work this way, and now we're seeing supernatural space that no man has ever seen before, but you just saw it.
But all the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put their calculus together again.
What are the odds?
And we'll solve one by one each and every one of the quantum paradoxes, including my favorite one. And I'll be looking forward to that. I hope you will be too. This is Galactic. Keep looking up.